Hi, good morning and welcome to the Weather Desk. Meteorologist Evan Stewart here, and today it's all about Erin, and that'll be the case here over the next half hour as we talk about what's going on with Erin right now, what we can expect as we go into this afternoon, and then we'll have some live shots from down along the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But let's get right into it, talk about the headlines today on the Weather Desk. We're looking at, of course, talking about Hurricane Erin, that live update from NAGCIT. And of course, we are having some issues at the ECSC as well because of the rough surf that we've seen along the Virginia Beach oceanfront. And if you were watching yesterday, we were talking about how they've had to bring in a lot of the equipment. They're on pause for today, but they're expected to be back out there into the day tomorrow. So we are under a weather impact alert here in Hampton Roads. If you're watching from elsewhere across the United States, we're here in Norfolk, Virginia, right along the beautiful Virginia coastline, and we cover all the way from the eastern shore, the Delmarva, down through the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Of course, the areas that are being hardest hit by Hurricane Erin, and here across eastern Virginia, North Carolina, we're talking about tidal flooding, rough surf. We've got beach erosion going on. We've had overwash along Highway 12. We have portions of Highway 12 that are closed off down through the southern Outer Banks of North Carolina, down towards Hatteras and Buxton. So that's the big concern here through coastal Virginia and North Carolina. And we want to encourage everybody up and down the East Coast to stay weather aware, because if you're a beach goer, maybe you're vacationing through parts of South Carolina or up along the Northeast trying to get in that one last weekend here before school starts, we've got those rip currents all up and down the East Coast. So that is a big concern here for the eastern half of the country. So this is the 8 o'clock advisory in from the National Hurricane Center. We'll get another update at 11 o'clock this morning. Hurricane Hunter aircraft have been out there investigating the storm. But as of 8 o'clock this morning, we had 105-mile-per-hour winds measured within the storm. That might be a little bit generous with Erin. I imagine, you know, when we get to that 11 o'clock advisory, you might see those winds come down just a little bit. It's really academic at this point whether the storm is strengthening or weakening, because the biggest effects are being felt right now and will continue into this afternoon as Erin is now starting to pull away from the U.S. East Coast. Made the closest run here about 200 miles from Cape Hatteras about 6 hours ago. Now it's 210 miles east of Cape Hatteras, moving to the north-northeast at 17 miles per hour. And that forward progress is going to continue, and it's actually going to pick up speed. Notice the forecast calls for it to continue to weaken, and eventually it's going to move off into the North Atlantic. As a matter of fact, you see that right there? That's Paris. This is Europe over here, and just behind the banner up there, that's Reykjavik, Iceland. So by Tuesday morning, this storm or its remnants will be all the way up into the North Atlantic. But again, still 50, 65-mile-per-hour winds, so it'll still have an impact even into early next week through parts of Europe. But around here, we still have those tropical storm warnings up for coastal Virginia and North Carolina. You can see Erin right there working its way off towards the north and east, just skirting the Outer Banks of North Carolina. The heaviest of the rain is already offshore. Some of those rain bands could affect coastal areas, but this storm is quickly moving off towards the east, and it is still producing some very gusty winds here through coastal North Carolina. Now, this is the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. We can plot where it is right now, and you can see it's doing that traditional crisscross pattern out through the storm. You know, they make several penetrations through the eye wall, see where some of the strongest winds are, where the lowest pressure is, and you'll notice here, at least the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, they've only made one pass through the center of the storm, but right now the highest winds that have been detected have been 76 miles per hour. Of course, they'll make several passes through, do this X pattern, and you know, sometimes you'll find some of those stronger winds in other portions of the storm. You might notice here on the southern and southwestern edge, starting to see the storm erode a little bit. That's because we're starting to see some wind shear affect the storm, and that's serving to weaken it just a little bit as well. As the storm moves towards the northeast, that wind field is starting to expand, so it does spread all the way to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and that's why we have seen wind gusts over tropical storm strength as we have gone through the overnight and early this morning. This is a little bit of a color-coded version of the satellite view, and it sort of shows the same thing. You'll notice As we go back here about 6 to 12 hours, we had a lot more of the brighter whites and those darker blacks in there, indicating the colder cloud tops. That's where we have those big thunderstorms where you would have some of those strongest winds. And again, you'll notice we're not seeing that nearly as much here around the center of Erin. We're seeing more of the reds and the oranges. Again, another sign that maybe the storm is starting to weaken. So by that 11 o'clock advisory here coming up in a couple of hours, we'll likely see that the storm has weakening. Again, at this point, doesn't really matter as far as the forecast goes. The storm is moving away from land. And it's still producing some big waves that are propagating towards the coastline. Mentioned that overwash along Highway 12. Portions of the roadway are closed because it's covered in water. And we've seen some tidal flooding here, even along the Chesapeake Bay through the rivers of the James and the York River. We've seen some flooding here through parts of Norfolk, the downtown area, because of the high tide that is coming up here just around 9 a.m. As the storm exits. Again, we'll start to see those winds diminish, skies clearing a little bit later on tonight, but the tidal flooding will still be an issue because those waves propagating out, and we have more of the astronomical high tide in the evening today. So we'll still see moderate to major tidal flooding here through coastal Virginia and North Carolina as we approach that high tide around 6:45 for the Outer Banks, 6:45, 7 o'clock, and around 9 o'clock through coastal Virginia. So we still have tropical storm warnings up all the way from the North Carolina coastline through the Outer Banks up towards Chincoteague, includes the Chesapeake Bay, the Albemarle and Pamlico Sounds, and along the coastal waters all the way up towards the northeast. So let's talk about those wave heights out there, because earlier we saw wave heights that were coming in at around 45 feet from one of the buoys around the center, and we're still looking at wave heights as we go here through this afternoon, up around 10 to 15 feet, some 18-foot waves near shore here through the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But as the storm continues to work its way off towards the north and east, we will see those tide levels come down, we'll see the waves coming down, and we'll see some improving conditions as we head into the weekend. Of course, this morning, Hurricane Erin has been stirring up this rough surf, as we mentioned, all along the East Coast, and conditions have been getting worse this morning, with the Outer Banks, of course, preparing for the brunt of this storm, as we're seeing right now. ABC's Rhiannon Alley has the latest.
Overnight conditions deteriorating along the East Coast as Hurricane Erin churns closer to shore. The storm's outer bands hitting North Carolina's Outer Banks. Dangerous surf crashing ashore, threatening homes and businesses.
We do have a number of threatened oceanfront structures. These are houses that no longer have a protective dune in front of them. They're very vulnerable to the waves, to the high surf.
The high swells flowing over this dune and flooding Highway 12, the main road running the length of the islands. A portion of it closed down overnight. North Carolina's governor pre-positioning swift water rescue teams and National Guard troops, urging drivers to stay away from flooded roadways.
Don't do it. You do not know how deep the water is or how fast it is running.
Utility crews in Dare County standing by, ready to respond to any power outages. The massive hurricane now growing in size as it moves towards the northeast. The storm causing powerful rip currents from Florida to Maine.
It's brutal. It's so strong out there, and the undertow is honestly dangerous.
Many beaches shut down, including in New York City, where these surfers couldn't resist the waves that could reach up to 20 feet high today. Officials on the New Jersey shore warning people to not only stay out of the water, but off the beach entirely.
You can get a rogue set of waves coming in, and if you're on the beach, comes in, it'll take your feet right out from under you and pull you right out.
Rhiannon Alley, ABC News, New York.
Now, staying on the Outer Banks, the wind and the surf are really starting to pick up. Take a look at this. This is high tide in Dare County last night, and you can see the water rushing into the parking lot at the Avon Fishing Pier. Now, as of this morning, no damage has been reported. Right now, Brianna Fallon is about 45 minutes north of the Avalon Pier. She's been at Jeanette's Pier in Nags Head all morning. Brianna, how are conditions out there? It looks a little windy.
Yes, it is definitely windy. It's been windy all morning. I'm sure you can see my hair kind of flying around. I'm trying to hold my hood down so it actually stays, because sometimes when some of these big waves come and crash against the pier, we've been getting some of the splash from it. But if you guys want to take a look at the waves yourself, Look at these waves. So we've been seeing really rough waves, big choppy waves, rows of them just along the water here all day, and we've been seeing people actually coming out to both record and just take a look at the beautiful views, because honestly, what everybody is saying, that it's truly incredible how big these waves are, and that's what we've been hearing from a lot of people walking by. They're just amazed by the sights that they're seeing from the pier and just looking out into the water. But today there's still that threat for coastal flooding from Hurricane Erin as it continues to move along and off the coast. Now, yesterday, folks who did not evacuate from Hatteras Island were asked to shelter in place after officials closed parts of NC-12 near the Bassnett Bridge over the Oregon Inlet to all southbound traffic, now that extreme overwash threatens the road. And there's no official time that NC-12 will open back up, but NCDOT told 13 News Now last night that they will reassess the road this morning. And again, it is crazy out here. It's so windy. The wind doesn't feel like it's calmed down, and we've been out here since pretty early this morning. But I will say it's much better to be up on the pier and have some of the water from the ocean kind of splash onto us than have the sand in our eyes like we were getting from down on the beach earlier this morning. So just make sure to stay safe out there. Brianna Fallon, 13 News Now.
Now, before you go, I've been down there along the Outer Banks when we've had tropical storms. Have you been to the end of the pier?
I did actually. So it's way too windy to bring the camera down there and just, but I did go to the end actually right before this hit, and the waves look incredible. You can see them out for miles, honestly, these waves forming, which, is definitely a sight to see, Evan.
Yeah, now, was the pier shaking? I've been out towards the end of the pier, and it gets a little spooky, a little eerie.
Yes, it was shaking from all the wind. I mean, the wind is crazy out here. I was even sitting on a bench right next to where I'm standing right now, and every now and then I could feel it shaking, and that's still pretty far away from the end of the pier.
And I know a lot of folks out there are probably getting in some fishing as well, or they want to, because this does stir up some of the fish a lot of times. So some good fishing sometimes after tropical systems. Thank you. Get inside, get out of the wind here. All righty, that's down along the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Of course, that's the weather conditions right there at the pier. The big concern, as we've talked over the past several days, that this was going to be a coastal event, and it was really going to impact the Outer Banks, coastal Virginia and North Carolina, especially with the high tides. We've already seen that overwash along Highway 12. And let's talk about some of those high tides coming up here. Just past this morning's high tide down in Duck, that was at 7 a.m. We got around 6 feet or so. Looking at another foot of water as we go through this evening's high tide. That comes up again around 6:45, 7 o'clock in Duck, calling for major tidal flooding. So that takes us into that major category. So once again, we're going to have issues with that overwash. Moderate tidal flooding as we go into tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening. So similar to what we saw this morning. So tidal flooding still going to be an issue down along the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Now here in Virginia, at the Lynn Haven Inlet, we saw some issues out along Shore Drive with some water coming in, even though it's technically minor tidal flooding. Tides this evening are going to be higher, about a foot higher, and that high tide comes in around 9 o'clock. So this is Lynn Haven Inlet. That's right there at Chicks Beach. The Lesnar Bridge coming in around Shore Drive. As we get into Friday, tide levels starting to come down. That's certainly some good news there as well. As we head towards Sewell's Point, this is sort of the benchmark for all of Hampton Roads, as this recording station has been around for the longest time, and it's sort of where we compare prior storms, Isabel, the 1933 hurricane. So we're not talking about those levels of flooding, but we still saw some issues, even though we technically had minor tidal flooding around The Hague and Norfolk. We had issues out there, and we're still dealing with some issues of some flooding in some parts of the areas that typically flood. So not unusual to see those areas flood here with a passing tropical system. But we are looking at moderate tidal flooding coming up this evening, and then minor tidal flooding as we go into the day on Friday. And then in Yorktown, we're looking at some issues, some nuisance flooding this morning, getting up into moderate tidal flooding as we go into this afternoon and this evening, and then into the day tomorrow, minor tidal flooding again. So this is up around Yorktown, through the York River. And again, we're dealing with some of that flooding as well. Now, we mentioned it earlier that there are several beachfront homes on the Outer Banks, specifically in Rodanthe, that might not make it through this storm. Take a look at this video from back in May of 2022. It shows a home being swept away by the ocean during a different storm. And since then, at least 5 other homes on that stretch of shoreline have also collapsed. Derek Lytle has a closer look at the threat that the remaining homes are now facing.
Concern looming for people near Rodanthe, including Ryan Jones.
This is rough to see these houses that this has been standing for so long and they might not make it through the night.
He and others say all they can do is watch and pray that the damage caused is not devastating.
There's nothing left here to protect this. It's a dying breed of houses.
Further south in Buxton, cars seen stuck desperate to be freed off of Highway 12. People living nearby say they're expecting more damage through the end of the week.
It's like a lot of landmarks in here. Like the hotels, like we're surprised they haven't fallen yet because of how bad it is.
Landmark motels, residents say, have stood the test of time, now in jeopardy of significant damage. You can see the intensity of these waves wash in. It's actually taken out the stair casing to this residence, and it sits fully submerged in the sand. It's just incredible to see the power of these waves as they rush up to us right here where we stand in Buxton outside of the famous motels. The artery into Buxton shut off Wednesday evening. It's closed between Mark Bass Knight Bridge and Hatteras Village.
Just trying to get home.
Longtime Frisco resident Walt Davenport says he had a medical visit past the bridge and desperately needed to get back home through the closure.
Medicine at the house that I can't go a night without. I still see people pouring, coming up north, and some people have gone right around the barricade here.
Pulling through together, residents are riding out the rough.
It's definitely a local tight community around here, even if you're on this southern island or even above on the top side. But these people down here, they take care of each other, and they'll make it.
Now, another reminder that NC 12 is now closed down towards the southern Outer Banks. Now, take a look. This is the North Carolina Department of Transportation. They made a decision to shut down the road from Oregon Inlet to Hatteras Village last night, and you can see why. It's totally washed out. Now, you remember that if you come across water and flooding, turn around, don't drown, do not try to drive through that. Now, Hampton Roads here in coastal Virginia still feeling the impacts of the storm. While Erin will bring big waves through Sunday, the strong winds and surf forced organizers to press pause on the 62nd annual Coastal Edge East Coast Surfing Championships. Yesterday, crews had to dismantle the competition setup as choppier waters and storm surge expected to bring bigger threats as we head through the day today. Organizers are telling us that they're hoping to get things running back up as soon as possible.
Yeah, we're definitely expecting a storm surge with the high tides. Working with the City of Virginia Beach, they have great departments that we came together of the meeting of the minds, and the decision has been made to clear the beach. So we're kind of deconstructing the Coastal Edge GCSE tonight. Let the storm surge pass, the hurricane pass, and then we're going to build it right back up early Friday morning for a great weekend.
And organizers plan to start setting up again early tomorrow morning. Now, we're going to take a quick break. Coming up in just 2 minutes, I'll talk about what else is brewing out there in the Atlantic and, of course, have the rest of the forecast for Hampton Roads. Okay, we've talked a lot about Erin. Let's talk about what else is going on in the tropics, because we're about 3 weeks away from the peak of hurricane season, at least historically. That's around September 10th. And there is a lot going on out there in the tropics. Of course, Erin sort of stands out here, but you'll notice there are some waves out there. Another one coming off the coast of Africa, and maybe even a little something out here in the central Atlantic. So this is the first area that we're watching that does have some potential for development. As a matter of fact, it's expected to move off towards the northwest, eventually curving up towards the island of Bermuda. And you can see it's here east of the Lesser Antilles. Right now it has about a 40% chance of development over the next couple of days, 70% chance of development within the next week. All indications are right now that it is going to curve off towards the north, well east of the United States. But again, could become a brief tropical system as we go here through the next several days. So that's one area that we're watching. And then as we head a little bit farther towards the east, here are the Cabo Verde Islands right here. So this is just off the coast of Africa. That's off the edge of the screen here. But this is another area. It's something that we've termed Invest 99L, which basically the L means it's in the Atlantic Ocean. And we start at 90 and we go up through 99 and then we go back to 90. It's just the numbering system that the Hurricane Center uses. But this has about a 40% chance of development over the next couple of days, even into the next 7, about a 40% chance. That's really front weighted on the next couple of days. I think once we get past, this weekend, that window of opportunity for it to try to redevelop is going to become smaller. And then we mentioned earlier, a little bitty area of low pressure has about a 30% chance of development. It's this little cluster right in here. Doesn't look like much. Again, it has a very small window opportunity to develop here over the coming days. So let's talk about the forecast here for coastal Virginia and North Carolina, because again, we still have Erin that is out there looking a little ragged. We are starting to get some of those visible satellite images showing the clouds, and again, that southwest corner, we've seen a little bit of some erosion there of some of the organization of the storm. That's just a sign that we're starting to see some of that wind shear come in and start to tear the storm apart. Again, here coming up in about another hour and a half, we'll get that 11 o'clock advisory in from the Hurricane Center. Hurricane Hunter aircraft are out there investigating the storm right now, and it's working its way off towards the north and east, and we are generally looking at partly cloudy skies through eastern Virginia and North Carolina, and a couple of sprinkles, a couple of showers. We've seen some of those showers as we have gone through the morning. That'll be the case here into this afternoon. High temperatures topping out right around 80 degrees. Again, generally mostly cloudy with those clouds breaking up here west of Interstate 95. So yeah, travel plans, towards western Virginia, central North Carolina, things aren't looking too bad, but still those breezy to windy conditions along the coastline, winds gusting, over 40 miles per hour over the next few hours. And then the storm starts to move off towards the east. We look for some gradual clearing as we head through the overnight and into the day on Friday. Behind a tropical system, a landfalling system, a lot of times it brings with it tropical conditions, but this is a storm that's passing towards our east. It's going to start to pull in some cooler air, and Friday is looking like an absolutely beautiful day with a lot of sunshine and temperatures into the low 80s, lower humidity, still a breeze, still winds coming in from the north, still those tidal issues that we talked about. So we'll still have to watch those north-facing and east-facing beaches for some of that tidal flooding, but the weather, the sensible weather that you feel, is going to be a lot nicer as we head into the day on Friday. Now, goes without saying, the beach forecast today in Virginia Beach, that high risk of rip currents, red flags have been flying. They've been flying all week. So looking at windy conditions, at surf height out towards the Virginia Beach oceanfront, 8 to 13 feet. So pretty big swells out there and that high threat of rip current. UV index is moderate because there will be a little bit of sunshine, but again, windy conditions expected. That rip current risk, we mentioned it already. Wallops Island up towards Ocean City, Virginia Beach down towards Kill Devil Hills. Most of these here on the eastern shore, those are mostly barrier islands, but certainly there is that risk of rip currents, right along the eastern shore as well. And that high risk extends all the way down past Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. So the forecast for today, temperatures right around 80 degrees. Again, some of these coastal showers, I think once you move inland, we're not going to see much in the way of rain. And it's really not been forecast to be a rain event here with Erin. It was really going to be a coastal event with the rough surf and the tidal flooding and the beach erosion. Windy, a few coastal showers, temperatures in the upper 70s to around 80 degrees through the peninsula, middle peninsula, northern neck and eastern shore. And again, windy with coastal showers through North Carolina, temperatures up around 80 degrees. Later tonight, 70 degrees, diminishing winds, skies start to clear out. Winds out of the north 15 to 30 miles per hour, gusting up to 35 in tomorrow. 80 degrees, mostly sunny, breezy, and we'll call it rather pleasant. And then as we get into the weekend here in eastern Virginia, North Carolina, temperatures in the low to mid 80s. We are looking at a chance for a few isolated showers coming up into the day on Sunday. 20-30% chance, so no reason to cancel any of those outdoor plans just yet. And then 85 on Monday, but then we watch another cold front moves in, and we're going to see those temperatures drop. And some of the long-range forecasts as we get beyond the 7-day, they're saying that it looks like August is going to end on a cool note as well, very much the way it started. Now, for the latest updates on the tropics, I want to remind you, check out Hurricane Hub Live on 13 News Now Plus. We do it every day. It says weekdays. We do it every single day, every night at 8 o'clock. Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandagis will take a closer look at what's going on in the tropical Atlantic. And over the weekend, Hunter Forrest will take it over. Sometimes I'll be there. Tim might be there, depending on who's working. But we always want to take a look at what's happening in the Atlantic and in the Pacific if something's going on. Just download the app for your TV and watch for free. So I want to thank you for joining me here on my inaugural edition of the Weather Desk. It's my first time of doing it. I think it turned out pretty good. So again, we do the Weather Desk every morning at 9 a.m. right here on 13 News Now Plus. Again, I want to thank you for joining us. By tomorrow, Erin will be a memory. Still having to deal with a little bit of tidal flooding, but we're looking at some improving weather and a pretty nice weekend coming up. Again, thanks for joining us here on the Weather Desk on 13 News Now Plus.